Ideas are alive. Some save us, some destroy us. I am Daniel and this is Daniel Speaks. Hey everyone and welcome back. In the world of investing, we are often bombarded with charts, numbers, and expert opinions. But what if I told you there's another powerful tool, something you already possess, that can significantly impact your decisions? Today, we are diving into chapter 5 of Inside the Investor's Brain, and it's all about this fascinating, often overlooked force, intuition. Think of it as that quiet whisper, that gut feeling that sometimes guides you even when the logic isn't crystal clear. Ever had a hunch about a stock that paid off, or a bad feeling about a deal that you later realized was a bullet dodged? That's the realm we are stepping into. Let's unravel the mystery of investor intuition. The author kicks things off with a real head scratcher. A story about an investment banker operating in the high-stakes world of million-dollar deals. This wasn't some small-time player. We are talking about someone who, as the author tells us on page 67, is no stranger to high stakes. He frequently negotiates deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars with multiple competing parties. In early 2006, he was deep in negotiations to buy a small mining company for a client. The terms on the table were fantastic, a real win for his team. Everyone was ready to seal the deal. Imagine, for a cool $220 million, his client would snag significant land loaded with mineral rights, a fully operational mine, and even a small prospecting division. It looked like a done deal, a sure thing. But then came the unexpected twist. The night before the signing, this seasoned negotiator couldn't sleep, not a wink. At first, he was completely in the dark about why. But as the hours tripped by, around 3 in the morning, a feeling started to bubble up, an inkling, as the author describes on page 67. Initially, he didn't know why, but by 3 a.m., he had an inkling. Driven by this unsettling feeling, he made a bold move. First thing in the morning, he picked up the phone and cancelled the entire deal. Can you picture the chaos that must have ensued? His colleagues were likely stunned, maybe even furious, as the author notes on page 68. Initially, his colleagues were incredulous. The deal had been agreed. How could he renege without consulting them? But he stood firm. He asked them to trust him, to keep quiet. Zip it, he told them, requesting they make no calls and discuss nothing with the other side. He had a hunch, a feeling he couldn't quite put into words. Then the unbelievable happened. 24 hours later, the seller's broker called back with an offer, a 10% discount. Suddenly, the $220 million deal was now worth $198 million. The banker, who couldn't sleep the night before, slept soundly before signing the new papers the next day, closing a deal that was now even more favorable. The burning question is, how did he know? How did he sense that they weren't getting the best possible terms? When the author pressed him on his answer was intriguing. As we read on page 68, when these things happen, I don't think about it. I just go with it. He simply trusted that inner voice, that feeling of unease. He explained, I knew that I wasn't sleeping the night before the deal. Then I had to call it off. I wanted us to keep our heads down for a few days until we heard from the other side. And the other side gave in, like I suppose I figured they would. It was a hunch, a physical manifestation of something being off, that ultimately saved his client a fortune. So what's the science behind this mysterious gut feeling? The author introduces us to the work of Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman, who, as mentioned on page 68, postulates that there are two broad neural systems underlying decision-making, the analytical and the intuitive. Think of it like this. We have our logical brain, that one that crunches numbers, analyzes data, and methodically weighs pros and cons. That's the analytical system. But then we have this other system, the intuitive one. It's fast, it's based on feelings, and it often operates below our conscious awareness. It's that quick sense of knowing without necessarily knowing why. This chapter, as the author states on page 68, describes the process of optimal intuitive decision-making in market-like conditions, risky, uncertain, and with performance expectations and time pressure. These high-stakes environments, if we can manage our minds effectively, can actually sharpen our intuitive abilities. The author emphasizes that intuitive decisions rely on gut knowledge, and this chapter aims to show us both the incredible advantages and the potential pitfalls of listening to this inner voice in the world of finance. Historically, there's been a tendency to view emotions as something that clouds our judgment. Even today, the idea of purely rational being, someone untouched by feelings, might seem ideal. Think of Mr. Spock from Star Trek, a character designed as part of the advanced race that strive for pure logic. As the author points out on page 69, the creator of Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, designed Vulcans as an advanced humanoid race who struggled mightily to make decisions based solely on logic. Yet even the Vulcans in Star Trek couldn't entirely escape their emotions and developed elaborate rituals to manage them. And often the human characters with their messy emotions were the ones who truly understood complex situations. This leads to a crucial question. How do we as humans integrate these feelings, these intuitions into our rational decision-making process? Traditional investment theory often paints a picture of the investor as a purely rational being. According to this view, as the author notes on page 69, people use reasoning and objective analysis during decision-making. They meticulously weigh potential outcomes, calculate probabilities, and arrive at a choice after a series of logical steps, a risk-reward analysis. But the reality of the market, with its inherent uncertainties and sudden burst of volatility, often doesn't align with its perfectly rational model. The author points out on page 70 that in a world where ultimate outcomes are uncertain and volatility can arise unexpectedly, investment practice is not as rational as theory suggests. Interestingly, there isn't yet a single widely accepted psychological theory that fully counters this assumption of investor rationality. However, the author's experience coaching professional investors reveals a different story. What he observed is that while reason-based judgment is the primary tool, there's often an important dose of intuition, gut feel, injected just before the actual choice, as mentioned on page 70. Many of the top portfolio managers follow a two-step process. First, they conduct a thorough rational analysis of all the available facts and figures. They gather information from various sources: company management, customers, suppliers, employees, and stock analysts. But then, to consolidate all this complex information into a single decision, they tap into their intuition. They essentially ask themselves, does this investment feel right? More often than not, these intuitive gut feelings play a significant role in guiding their research and ultimately determining whether to buy or sell. The good news is that the initial analytical phase is something we can control. Many investors define their investment philosophy beforehand, outlining the specific indicators they look for. Once they collect the quantitative data, they can perform a disciplined and objective analysis. While beginners might fixate on just one or two factors, the best investors go a step further. They pay attention to and are guided by their feelings about certain aspects of an investment. Perhaps they feel uneasy about volatile cash flow or complex off-balance sheet transactions, prompting them to dig deeper. Or maybe they have a strong positive feeling about a company's innovative products, leading them to weigh analyst forecasts with a more optimistic lens. As the author concludes on page 70, however, intuition comes into play. It is far more widespread in investment practice than most theorists concede. Consider this. Our senses are constantly feeding our brains an enormous amount of information, far more than we consciously process. The author points out on page 70 that the human senses relay about 10 million times more pieces of information per second to the brain than can be consciously perceived. So how does our brain possibly make sense of all this data? It uses shortcuts, simplifications to help us navigate this overwhelming influx. The vast majority of our daily decisions aren't the result of lengthy deliberations. They are intuitive. rapid, automatic, and happening beneath the surface of our conscious awareness. These gut feelings often underline some of our most significant choices. As the author emphasizes on page 70, intuition and gut feel often underlies some of our most consequential decisions. Intuitive decision making is owned unconsciously through experience, and it is the foundation of more than 90% of all decisions. Interestingly, trying too hard to consciously monitor our intuition often backfires. Its elegance lies in its subconscious operation, not taking direct commands from our higher cognitive functions. When we start overthinking a decision, we drag the intuitive process into the spotlight of our conscious mind, and this can actually drown out those subtle, crucial intuitive signals. Without practice, consciously trying to tap into intuition when making a decision usually leads to frustration rather than clarity. As the author explains on page 71, thinking about a decision brings the process into conscious awareness, and such conscious deliberation drowns out important aspects of the fragile intuitive process. In the business world, especially for seasoned professionals, deciding from the gut is a common way of handling situations with uncertain outcomes. The gut here refers to an experienced and intuitive understanding of the current situation. The intuitive hunch often surfaces as a feeling, a simple sense of, I've got a good feeling about this. But this feeling isn't random. It represents a subconscious emotional process manifesting as physical sensations. Some prominent business leaders even credit their intuitive decisions-making style for their success. Think of former General Electric CEO Jack, who even titled his autobiography, Jack, Straight from the Gut. In the high-stakes, inherently uncertain world of business, the ability to integrate intuition with expert judgment can be a powerful advantage. Some experienced investors become incredibly attuned to the subtle physical cues that accompany their intuitive hunches. Take George Soros, a true icon on Wall Street. Known for his exceptional long-term performance, the author highlights his incredible track record on page 70. Nothing that an initial $1,000 investment in his quantum fund in 1969 would have grown to a staggering $4 million by the turn of the century. Soros occasionally uses this physical sensation to inform his investment strategy. His son even revealed a fascinating insight into his decision-making process. As the author quotes on page 71, the reason he changes his position on the market or whatever is because his back starts killing him. It has nothing to do with reason. He literally goes into a spasm, and it's this early warning sign. So for Soros, physical discomfort can be a powerful indicator that something in the market feels off, prompting him to reevaluate his positions. He is not alone in this. Many experts learn to recognize these gut feelings or hunches that manifest as physical sensations. Soros generates his investment plans by integrating both his intellectual understanding of market dynamics and these somatic or bodily signals. As the author explains, drawing from insights about Soros on page 71, according to Soros, his theory informs his decisions as his body gives him the signals. The making of self-reinforcing trend brings water to his mouth. The need for a portfolio shifts make his back hurt. His body knows he needs to take action or to take careful note of a situation before his intellect can grasp it. He is incredibly tuned into these subtle physical sensations that can reflect potential risk or opportunity. Importantly, Soros doesn't rely solely on intuition. He uses these physical cues to complement his analytical assessment of market price action. Interestingly, a study by trading coach Doug, mentioned on page 71, found that the personality trait of intuition was significantly more prevalent in portfolio managers compared to analysts. Found that the personality trait of intuition was significantly more prevalent in portfolio managers, which is 80%, compared to analysts, which is only 25%. This suggests that intuition might be a distinct skill set, with portfolio managers being more inclined to follow their gut feelings rather than solely relying on explicit data. However, it's crucial to remember that intuition isn't always easy to follow. Sometimes strong emotions can overpower those subtle gut feelings. Feelings arising from past successes or failures even the anticipation of future gains or losses can bias our intuitive judgment. Similarly, environment with significant time pressure, social pressure like in a tense investment committee, or performance pressure can easily distort our intuitive abilities. Fortunately, taking moments for quiet reflection can help us become more open to the intuitive consideration of complex information. The author shares a compelling example of how detaching from memories, expectations, and current pressure can actually allow the intuitive process to unfold more effectively. It's from a conversation with a top hedge fund manager, and the author's notes provide a fascinating glimpse into his decision making. When asked how he knows that to invest in, this investor replied, as quoted on page 71, I just feel a lot of information. I gather it all up, and when I sit on it like an information sponge most of the time, really like a sponge, I'm not trying to do anything with it, the information. I'm not looking for answers. I just sit on it, and when the time is right, it comes to me. I'll feel a little tickle that tells me to pay attention to something, like a tiny look at that kind of feeling. I don't know what I'm looking at exactly, but I just pay some more attention to it. When the author inquired how this translates into action, the investor explained, as noted on page 72, often without knowing why, I started planning deals. It may be to buy shares in an Indian refrigerator manufacturer or a pipeline or mineral rights in Peru. Who knows what the inkling will lead to? But that's how it works. It's like I step out of the way. I can't have distractions. I can't think too much about it or explain how I do it. I just get into the zone and I don't get out of it until I do what the feeling is compelling me to do. What's remarkable is the diversity of his investments, seemingly unrelated industries. When the author questioned where he gets his intelligence about so many different areas, the investor's response was insightful, as quoted on page 72. The information I take in is workplace stuff, strategic and financial information that my traders and analysts bring me or that I see over the terminals. Nothing more than what everyone else is seeing. Expect that I'll go or send someone to get deeper information when I feel the need for it. The investor acts like an information filter, allowing his intuition and experience to identify patterns and setups that others might overlook. If he were to consciously overthink the information, trying to force an answer, he would likely lose that ability to be in the zone. Notice his emphasis on maintaining mental calm, not dwelling on past outcomes or future projections, but rather pursuing his inklings with open curiosity. This leads to a general idea, which then directs him towards a specific opportunity.